away we go. This should be fun. That's my man, Ira Schafel. I'm at a Waffle House. I'm Jeff. Good to see you guys. Hey, when news breaks, baby, when news breaks. Ira, a good day to you, sir. It's one thing after another with this program. The news is that Gus Malzahn decides to call it a day. There's a lot of different directions we can go with this. I want to know, where do you want to take it? Because I on the one hand, Ira, none of us are surprised that it kind of ends the way that it does, but the timing of it is very, very strange. And it feels like, if I'm a Florida State fan watching this, we couldn't have gotten this worked out a couple of months ago in the midst of recruiting, before all that they had to go through and recruit to a system and all of that. So I'll let you start wherever you want to go, brother.
I'm trying to avoid going with a joke about like their offense being smothered and covered and chunked, but hopefully Waffle House appreciates our man. Two big, huge news things have revolved around Waffle House over the last couple of years. Aslan and I were covering that from a Waffle House, the Snub, back in 2023. That's where we watched the selection show from. Anyway, yeah, man. Yeah, like you said, I think if this had broken 2 months ago, we would not have been surprised really at all. We talked about this a lot. It was awkward, in fact, the last few weeks of the 2025 season, where it felt like maybe Gus was probably done with being an offensive coordinator. Didn't seem like he was really in it as much as maybe we had thought earlier in the year, but then he decided to stay. And so this is kind of dragged on. I think that in terms from a big picture standpoint, again, the reasons it's not surprising is he did leave the team. One of the things that, I want to remind people, because I'm sure a lot of people initially are going to be mad about the situation, be mad at the way, not just the way it's handled, but maybe even at Gus Malzahn for doing this. Just want to remind people, he did leave the team for a couple days during the season because his mom was really sick and he wanted to be with his family. And if you go back to even before last season, part of the speculation also was when I did an interview with him last July before preseason camp, he said that he was really seriously considering retiring at the end of last season, the previous season at UCF, because he wanted to spend time with his grandkids. He's done kind of what he wanted to do as a head coach. And, he's at the tail end of his career and he was going to retire. And then when he started talking to Mike Norvell about coming back and being an OC and not having to recruit and not having to deal with NIL and all the other stuff that's going on in college sports, that he was tempted to come back for that reason. He could just be a football coach again. Well, now he did that and they got to beat Alabama one more time. And then as the season went on, it just felt like maybe, some of the attraction to that was starting to wane. So from that standpoint, I would just encourage people, going through what we went through with his mother and his family reasons. It's not just a matter of, I don't want to be at Florida State. Like, I don't think his heart was in it. And whether he finally came to that conclusion in November or in January, that's his decision. So, again, I would just remind people that there's more personal reasons than just, I don't love this job.
Yeah, I look at it less as a time to necessarily take shots at Gus. I look at it just as dysfunction within an organization. It's one more thing where this is the kind of thing that happens when things aren't running smoothly. The sense we got last year, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think we all openly speculated that things didn't look like they were moving smoothly between he and the head coach, Mike Norvell. I think that there was some friction within that grouping. I had been told, you try to track these things down and confirm what you can, but the whispers were that wasn't a symbiotic relationship, that they didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things. And I think that if the money hadn't been a part of all of this, they probably would have moved on from Gus. Gus did interview for another job. We do know that. I got the sense that Gus either wanted to retire or be elsewhere. And I think Mike would have been okay with that, but money was a factor, and that's a familiar theme. That's an interesting part to all this, Ira, is that Gus Malzahn walks away. Do you think, I'm being speculative here, but do you think they were trying to negotiate something, or did they hold his feet to the fire if he didn't want to be here because they weren't going to fire him and have to pay him all that money? How do you think this went down?
Yeah, and I think we'll probably get a clear answer to that as time goes on. I don't have the exact answer, but yeah, I think the feeling we had at the end of last season was that maybe there's a game of chicken going on, because you did bring Mike Norvell agreed to bring Gus Malzahn as the offensive coordinator. It clearly didn't go great. I mean, we had one beautiful night in August, but as it went on, things didn't go well. And kind of what I was following up on what I was saying at the beginning is, Gus, I think, was attracted to the idea of coming in, being an OC, and not necessarily having to deal with all the other stuff. But then I think as he went through it, the part he probably didn't gamble or count on was the fact that he also wouldn't have all the power that goes with being a head coach. And so there's a lot of things that Gus wanted that Mike acquiesced on. There's some things that Gus wanted that Mike didn't acquiesce on. And so, yeah, there was some kind of butting of the heads. Plus, and you and I have talked about this, and I wrote about this late in the season. I'm not sure that Mike Norvell knew exactly what he was getting into with this either. It's one thing to turn the offense over to Gus Malzahn, but Mike Norvell is still the head coach. He still has to answer the questions in the press conferences. He has to explain why they're doing some of the things they're doing offensively, and he's not getting to call the shots anymore. So I think there's frustration on his side as well. So clearly it was not a good situation. I am glad they figured out a way to get out of it, because I don't think, again, I think both of them were not thrilled with the situation. So I think this is probably best for all parties involved. I do wonder if we'll find out later that there was a settlement, because to the numbers you're talking about is Gus left a lot of money on the table at UCF.
Yep.
If UCF had fired Gus, they would have owed him several $1 million. He agrees to come to Florida State and gets a 3-year contract that's going to pay him about $2 million a year. And there's still 2 more years on that deal. So there's about $4 million or so left on that contract. And if Florida State had fired him, they would have had to pay him that money. They didn't want to do that. If he had left, he would have been walking away from that money that he would have been owed if UCF fired him. So you feel like there's probably some sort of negotiation that went on, but we don't have the terms of that as of this point. And it's possible he just finally decided, you know what, you called my bluff. I don't want to be here. I'm going to leave even without that money. That's possible. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if there was some sort of settlement.
Yeah, because, I looked. He was one of the top, as of last year. I don't know what it would have been this year. As of last year, Gus Malzahn was a top 5 paid OC in college football. It seems unlikely you're walking away as a top 5 paid OC in all of college football just because you want to retire. I would think they had to have negotiated something. Again, I have no idea. Maybe you're right. Maybe he's got all the money he's ever needed and he just walked away. But it seems like that would have been worked out a little sooner. I think the timing of this is a little frustrating for some people. At the same time, I would suggest, we know Coach Harris will now be named the OC. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
My guess is, tell me if you think I'm wrong, there's no way in hell that Mike Norvell's not calling plays, correct?
Yeah, I think that's probably the direction they're going in. I think there's two. We've seen 2 different approaches. Well, heck, we've seen 3 different approaches during Mike Norvell's 7 years. But I think what's appropriate is to look at the Kenny Dillingham couple of years as offensive coordinator, and then the Alex Atkins couple of years as offensive coordinator, a few years as offensive coordinator. When Dillingham was here, he was the OC and the play caller to a degree. Like Mike Norvell, it was Mike Norvell's offense. And I think Kenny Dillingham was calling the plays, but I think, man, those 2 guys were on the same page. They worked all week on creating that game plan. We know how this works. You'll have a list of all your 1st and 10 plays, all your 2nd and 2 plays. And it was very much in lockstep, but Kenny got to be the play caller. Alex Atkins was not the play caller. It was Mike Norvell calling all the plays. My guess is it's going to go more that direction. Tim Harris, who has been FSU's passing game coordinator and was named co-offensive coordinator this offseason to kind of keep him and give him a raise. He has been the receivers coach, but he has been a play caller in the past. Gus has given him that when they were at UCF. I think there was a period of time where Gus let him have that role. So Gus could be more of a head coach. So, I do think that that's a possibility, and I think he'll have input. But yeah, man, Mike Norvell knows his job's on the line. His career is on the line to some degree. And I can't imagine he's just going to turn that over. It was one thing to turn it over to Gus, and I don't think he loved that. I can't imagine he's turning it all over to Tim Harris. Now, what they'll say publicly is that I'm sure publicly for a while, they'll talk about how it's going to be them working together. But I would think when we look on Saturdays in the fall, I would think Mike Norvell is going to be looking at a play sheet again. That's what I think is going to happen.
I also think it's the best thing that could happen to him.
I
I
agree.
mean, and you've talked about that extensively, but I think you're spot on there. We agree on that wholeheartedly. I think he felt a sense of disconnection. I think it was a rudderless ship there for a while. At least as the head coach, he kind of was, stuck between a rock and a hard place. You bring this guy in, you turn over the reins, you feel disconnected, you don't like some of the elements of the offense, you might not like the way that certain personnel is being used, and yet you feel obligated, especially with the money that Gus was making, that you got to let him do it his way. Well, now you're up against it. Everybody knows that obviously Mike enters the season on the hottest of hot seats. Most of us find it somewhat incredulous that he's still here, but he is. And if I'm him, I've had great success as a play caller in my career. I helped build my name as a young and up and coming star in the business by being an innovative and forward thinking play caller. And if I'm going to go down with a sinking ship, I'm going down calling plays the way I want to call them. I can't fathom. And I actually think it's best for Florida State and it's best for Mike. I'm not trying to turn this into some great day, but I wasn't in love with Gus's offense. So obviously, I mean, my feelings have been known. If I'm Mike, I'm all in on this. I'm calling plays, and maybe there's a return to the Mike that was as engaged and connected as we saw 3 years ago.
I think it gives him a chance to be that. We'll see.
Right,
We don't know if he can, but this gives him the chance to possibly be that. Because, yeah, man, and to your point, what I wrote about this, I think it was after the Stanford game. I wrote, I watched him that whole Stanford game on the sideline, and it was like he didn't know where to go. He can't pull Tommy Castellanos aside and say, dude, what are you doing? We're in the red zone. You can't turn the ball over. It's not like, because Gus is talking to Tommy Castellanos. And so he kind of became just a highly paid cheerleader where he's just going over to groups and trying to kind of coach them up emotionally. But then at some point you do wonder if the players are asking themselves, like, dude, what are you, what do you do? Like, what impact do you have on this team? So, yeah, man, I think it could be really good for him. Again, there's no guarantees. It could go poorly, but if Gus Malzahn's heart wasn't in it, which I feel like we knew, and you've been saying late last season, you said it several times on your show, you didn't feel like Gus was, maybe this wasn't what he signed up for or whatever, but didn't seem to be fully invested. And you don't want to go into another year like that. And so I don't know. Again, I don't know the specifics. If Mike went to him and said, hey, man, are you all in? I don't know if Gus finally went home for the holidays and said, do I really want to do this again? Do I want to go through a spring practice? So from that standpoint, I don't know if we'll find out when we find out like what went into it. But as far as it relates to this team, I think there's going to be a lot of people right now this morning thinking, oh, this is, disastrous because we've been recruiting to his coaching style. We've been recruiting to his system. I don't know if it's that big of a deal. I mean, honestly, personally, because Mike Norvell's it's not like they turned down some big pocket passer that, to go get Ashton Daniels just because he fit Mike Norvell's system. I mean, Mike Norvell wants an athletic quarterback too. So I don't think that that's a huge problem. You did bring back Deuce. I think that's a positive thing. And if you had made a change, what were you going to get? Like if Gus had stepped down in November, I'm not sure what they would have been able to do in terms of hiring another offensive coordinator that would have been a bigger hit in the transfer portal and in the recruiting cycle. So again, I don't know. This isn't ideal, but I don't know how much better it would have been if Gus had retired in November.
It would always be speculation on our part. I would say that they would have had to have swung for the fences, Ira. The thought I had at one time and expressed on the air was that if you went a different direction, you would do so in order to lure a good young quarterback. So that would mean that you would go out and get Pitt's OC in order to bring in Heinschel at quarterback, something along those lines. That was the hope that a lot of us had, that Florida State would pivot that way and say, you know what? Probably can't afford, the $4, $5, $6 million quarterback, nor should you with this many holes in your roster. However, if you get out from under Gus, you can bring in an OC that already has a guy that he could take with him that has proven himself. That's why I bring up the Pitt situation a little bit.
That's a good one. And, you would have had to, if they wanted to do that, they probably could have done that maybe if they would have paid Gus $4 million to go away at that point in time.
Right. And they didn't want to do that. And that's come back. That's been a central theme in our discussions. I get it though. As Florida State fans, it just feels like this is part and parcel to what's gone on here over the last couple of seasons of disappointment. It just feels like there's dysfunction. And there's no way to see something like this afterwards and say it doesn't feel dysfunctional. You may be right, Ira, that it doesn't have that big of an impact one way or the other on the upcoming season, that the season was going to be what it was, whether Gus was here or not, right? That it's possible because the personnel is the personnel, and I don't know how good they're going to be. And Mike's offense is predicated largely on having a quarterback that is mobile, like we're talking about with Gus's offense. So I see your point there. I just think that the 10,000-foot view is sort of like, golly, Florida State really again? This is what we're doing here. It's I can see where fans just feel another sense of aggravation. But as far as the timing of it, I just find it fascinating. We'll know so much more in the next 3 to 4 days, I would assume, or 5 to 6 days, right? I mean, because to me, we're going to find out that something had to have been negotiated. This feels an awful lot like they were waiting Gus out, and then Gus realized they weren't, they weren't going to budge.
Well, and listen, man, there's no way around the fact that this is not some degree unexpected from their standpoint, because look at what they've done since the end of last offseason. Not only did you keep Tim Harris and Herb Hand, who are Gus Malzahn guys, but you also went and got Cam Martin as running backs coach as a Gus Malzahn guy. So it felt, honestly, there were people around the program who felt like things were kind of being set for, if you have to terminate Mike Norvell at some point early next season, that you're going to be back to where a lot of people thought this was heading last summer, which was Gus being the interim head coach and then figuring out what you're going to do after that. Because, you went more Gus heavy this offseason, and you bring in a quarterback that, think fits his system. So again, it's to your point, from a macro level and from a perceptions level, if you're a Florida State fan, yeah, man, you're going to get beat up on Twitter again today. You're going to take a lot of hits. People are going to be criticizing you. You're going to be criticizing yourself. That's all fine and good in terms of, that's just the lay of the land. That's what's going to happen. But I don't know if it doesn't end up being a positive from the standpoint of, I don't think Gus was ever going to be all in. He wasn't all in I think he was all in for Alabama. And then when the glow of that wore off and they started losing games, and then he realized he didn't have total control of the program. I think the luster of that wore off, and I don't think Gus was all in late last season. And then, so that wasn't probably going to come back at this stage of his career. So again, we can argue whether or not Mike Norvell is going to go back to his roots and be that guy and lead them. I do feel like he was a good play caller earlier in his career. I think that's there. People point to 2024. There was no play caller that was going to solve. That was a failure of Mike Norvell as general manager and personnel director, to me, more than it was play caller. So I think he can bring some positive things as a play caller. The question is, can he get these guys to believe in him again? Because I think that's been the biggest problem.
Well, I mean, if anybody's surprised, let me just say this: as far as anybody wakes up today, sees this news, and goes, "How in the world?" Well, look, you guys asked Gus Malzahn at the end of the season about whether or not he'd be back, and he says, "I'm just the I just run the offense," or whatever he said. Right? That was the quote.
At first his answer to big picture questions was, "I'm just the play caller. I'm the offensive coordinator." But when he was asked that about next season and are you going to be back, he said, "I'm just focused on Florida," because it was the Florida week.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't exactly an answer that spoke to great confidence about or a belief that he was going to be here or that he wanted to be here. I mean, nothing about that relationship seemed to have worked from the get-go, which is frustrating because it was seen as a lifeline at the time, and that was the reason that Mike brought him in with all the familiarity. But we did wonder aloud at that time, A, was that the right move? And we had debates about that. But then B, what would that dynamic look like? What would it look like when you bring in a former mentor and now you're his boss and things go right or they don't? How does that, who handles that well or doesn't from an ego standpoint, from a power structure standpoint? There's just a lot of that there. I don't think there'll be any question going into this season. Obviously, the bullseye was already going to be on Mike, but Mike, I think, will be the play caller now. And in some ways, that's got to be freeing if I'm Mike. I just think, you got nothing to lose. Let it all hang out. Every week throwing the kitchen sink at people because this is it. This is the last stand. I understand that we can talk about whether or not he'll be back after this season, and that he may or may not be. We don't know because we just saw what play out the way that it did. But I don't think there's any doubt he's calling plays. They're just
and and again, I'm not trying to just be the positive guy just for being the positive guy, but I didn't love what was happening with Gus, and again, it would have been better if this happened in November and then they had a scenario like you're talking about where you go get Cade Bell is the coordinator and he brings in Heinschel and that's a situation that plays out. Yes, that would have been better, but I never felt good about this situation with Gus. I mean, since 2 weeks after the Alabama game, once they started losing. And so think about the things they had to do to kind of acquiesce to Gus to even make this happen. He didn't go on the road recruiting. That was part of his contract. So your offensive coordinator is not out recruiting. Tim Harris became the co-offensive coordinator this offseason, but you didn't have your offensive coordinator out there going and recruiting. There were times during the year, I mean, I think you guys talked about it you and Tom talked about some on the show where he wasn't, around maybe in the month of May. He took time off, So again, it just didn't feel like the guy was all in. And I'm not criticizing for that. That's how they got him. Like that's how they got him to take the job. But there's some situations, and again, this is one that I never shared, something I heard very early on. When Gus first got here, like they had a staff meeting, and Gus sat in a chair at the head of the room with all the coaches. And Mike Norvell walks in, he's like, "Hey man, that's my chair." And that just kind of gave you a sense of where this, the challenge that this was going to be. Gus Malzahn's been a head coach for 15 years. And now he's got to go be subservient to a guy that, he used to be the mentor for. So again, it would have been threading an incredible needle for this to work in the long term. I had no confidence it was going to work going into 2026. I thought they'd make the best of it. I think this actually may give them a better chance. Again, we'll see. It could go horribly wrong, but I don't think there's any guarantee it was going to go well with Gus Malzahn either.
Yeah, I think a succinct way of wording that, Ira, is that this might work out as the best possible scenario for Mike, but the best possible scenario for Mike might be to go 5-7. We don't know. Possible. He could go 9-3. We're just saying, because Gus is gone doesn't suddenly mean Florida State's about to win. It just means that Mike is back in charge in a way that he maybe wasn't or didn't feel comfortable with, and now he has an opportunity to steer this ship to whatever it's going to be. I mean, there's plenty of people who think, yep, that ship is going straight into an iceberg. Okay, well, perhaps maybe it's doing what it was always going to do, but at least now he's in charge, and you don't have to sit back and kind of acquiesce and second guess week to week. It'll make for really sad luncheons, though, because I miss Gus Malzahn's disdain for all of us in the media. Just the level of vitriol that he had to kind of subvert and push down into his chest when he answered questions. Like, aren't you going to miss, Ira, when you offer up, posit that first question like you usually do, and then he goes, before he answers it? Like, this is so beneath me to have to talk to you, Ira, Corey, Jeff, Aslan, Tom, all of you. It's great. I'm going to miss it, though. I'll miss it.
Well, yeah, I don't think we're going to have a big going away party. A lot of times when a coordinator leaves after multiple years, like Kenny Dillingham, Adam Fuller's, Alex, some of those guys, they reached out when they left. Like, yes. Hey, enjoyed working with you.
Yep.
Hopefully we'll see each other down the road. That's
You're not getting a text. You're not getting a text from Gus.
I don't think any of us are getting texts from Gus. Maybe Matt will. Matt would talk to him about golfing every once in a while, so maybe Matt will. But I don't think the rest of us are.
It's a good point you bring up because it's a little behind the curtain there for the listeners. We do sometimes I got a really nice text from Adam Fuller and a few other coaches over the years, and you're always appreciative. You write back, thanks, enjoyed working with you as well or talking with you as well. We might get a middle finger emoji from Gus on his way out the door. It would be great if we did. I would savor it, actually. No, it's funny. I do wonder. Somebody brought it up in the chat I just saw, and I'm having a hard time seeing. If you're wondering why I'm in front of a Waffle House, guys, I was driving back from Tampa after last night's hockey when all this broke, and I had to pull over. So there's nothing like the highways and byways of Florida without a Waffle House, right? So this is a perfect backdrop. Anyhow, somebody said in the chat that, hey, maybe you guys will be back at practice. Oh, no. Oh, no.
The problem is I don't think Mike fought so hard to trying to get everybody to believe it wasn't because Gus didn't want us at practice, although a lot of us think it was because Gus didn't want us at practice. So I don't know if he can come out right now and say, okay, you guys can come back, because then it'll give up the gig. But yeah, you know, I mean, I listen, man, again, I'm not trying to be, you know, overly optimistic. It may be a disaster anyway, no matter what. But I got to think, man, Mike Norvell, if there's any chance of him getting his mojo back, being back in charge, man, might be it. And again, whether that's to get to 5-7 or 6-6 or 8-4, I don't know. But man, I got to think there's a part of Mike Norvell that's got to be a little bit fired up to know that he's back in charge. Do you see that at all?
100%. I don't think there's any doubt. I was told Mike wanted Gus gone at the end of the year, and that the powers that be were not going to move on that because of the money. I didn't. Hey, by the way, as critical as I've been of this administration and this athletic department, when I was and this is speculative, I cannot prove this to be true, but the guy several people that I talked with about the situation with Mike and Gus, you're right, it was tenuous at best. Mike wanted that to be over with. They couldn't come off that money. They weren't going to come off that money for Gus. And I said at the time, they shouldn't. Mike, you're the one who brought Gus in. You went and reached for a lifeline, and you brought Gus in, and they had to pay him good money. And now after 1 year, you don't like the way it's going, so you want Gus gone. But we're already in a pickle financially. We're not going to fire this guy after 1 year. If that's how it went down, and I'm sure it's a little bit more nuanced than that, but in the interest of brevity, I'm trying to get to the point. If that's the way it went down, today is a great relief for Mike Norvell, because he gets his wish. He gets what he wanted anyhow, which is Gus to be gone. He gets to walk into that building now and not have to deal with that. And, you know, he's back being the guy. I would think if you're Mike now, again, let it all hang out. You got nothing to lose. Everybody viewing this program from the outside, and many on the inside, already think this is a fait accompli for him, that he's done dealing. The only thing you can do is prove them all wrong, and you're in total control of play calling from this point forward. So there it is. I mean, to me, you get your wish. I can see how it could work. I think it's unlikely, but I can see where this is empowering for Mike.
Did Nick, I think, was going to highlight a few questions. I don't know if we want to take a few questions here before we wrap it up.
Yeah, I can't see that.
All right. All right. I'll give it a shot. So, I think it's Augie Noles says Norvell made his bones calling plays. With Mike calling plays, we have a higher ceiling, but also maybe a lower floor. That's probably a fair way. I don't know if it's a lower floor. Maybe it is. For the people that think that Gus was the reason they won more games than they did in 2024, I could see it that way. But again, man, I've said this all along. I don't think 2024 was a reflection on Mike Norvell as a play caller. I was more critical of Mike Norvell as a play caller in 2023. I feel like that team.
23 is a good one to cite, Ira. You and I agree on this.
Yeah, that team did not meet the sum of its parts offensively by the end of the year. I think Mike got gummed up in trying to get the ball to Keon. I think and we've seen some of the things you have to manage maybe with Keon during his time in the NFL. I think he was trying to get Jaheim Bell touches. I think he was trying to get Trey Benson touches. I think he was trying to, and Jordan Travis, as the good leader, teammate, I think he was trying to get guys involved too. Like, that team was not about just being the best it could be. I feel like they were trying to massage some things and work through some things. And so I would criticize Mike Norvell's play call in 2023 more than I would in 2024. 2024 was, you had a bad offensive line and a quarterback that needed a good running game and a good offensive line. And once that wasn't there, no plays you're calling are going to be any more successful than not. I think if you go back to pre-2023, I think if you can go put yourself in the mindset of 2022 and even times of 2021, I felt like, man, there were some good things on that offense, that what he was doing with what he had. So I do think there's a chance that there could be a higher ceiling. But I understand why people might think the floor would be lower, right?
You know what's weird, Ira? If you go back 2022, 2023, when you're watching a desperate Mike Norvell who understands in certain circumstances that he doesn't have the talent necessary to just line up and run plays the way that you can when you're the better team, he was very innovative. Everybody, we talk about the script. Remember the scripts for each half? People be like, oh, if he could only script the whole game. Well, the thing is, a lot of that stuff was very innovative in the way that he utilized his personnel. He catched teams really out of position early in games, and he got better.
Those LSU games. I mean, they ran some cool stuff.
Really cool stuff. The Louisville game, he ran some really cool things. Scheme open the tight end. I mean, wide open on the opposite side and misdirection stuff with little play action rollouts. He did a lot more stuff that, required him to be innovative because he knew they couldn't just line up and out physical somebody. Well, I dare say this team is not loaded. They don't have great personnel. You may have to get back to that mindset of having to be really, really innovative and keeping teams off balance. A lot of people will say, well, you should always do that. But sometimes when you have better personnel, it's just easier. I mean, Mickey Andrews ran the same defense over and over again. You know why? Because he had better players at every position than you did. And so he didn't have to worry about doing anything much more than a 4-3 over too high, and he'd let his Russians get after your ass. I mean, that can happen when you've got better players, but when you don't, you've got to be innovative. And I really believe that version of Mike was the more interesting version of Mike, the more engaged version of Mike, the innovative version of Mike that he made his bones, and that's how his reputation was built. I hope we get that version. I hope he's not so broken that we'll never see it again. But this provides that opportunity. If you're trying to spin it, I know I hate the word spin, but if you're trying to say, like, could this be a positive, Ira? We speculated a lot about that this morning. I think we agree that's how it would happen.
Right.
Any
more questions, Nick? All right. Nathaniel Hornblower, our old friend, says, so we just saved how much money? Well, we don't know exactly because, they would have had to pay him $4.5. I can't remember the exact number if they had fired him at the end of the 2025 season. So theoretically, you're saving that money, but I think we have a sneaking suspicion there may have been some sort of settlement. So we don't know that number yet.
Yeah, we don't know what it is, but I think they are saving money. There's no doubt about that. I don't know what the total will be, but they're not having to pay him for whatever this year and next, I wouldn't think.
Adam asks, why not leave the OC position open and hire someone new? I mean, at this time of year, Jeff, that's not an option, right?
No, I don't think it is. And I think that the one criticism you can have today, well, there's lots of criticisms, but I think one of the criticisms is what we've already discussed. If you could have got him out the door or agreed upon something sooner, you could have made a big play. It would have had to be a big money play, but you could have gone after an OC like Bell at Pitt, who would have brought the quarterback with him. You would have tried to do a 2-for-1, something like that.
All right. And we got one more. Isn't it good that he did leave after the portal class was wrapped up? Yeah, man, I think that's a great point, Eric. Yeah, I mean, I think that's and again, you could say it's unfortunate for these people, the players who may have signed thinking they were getting to play for Gus Malzahn. I'm thinking maybe like Trey Wisner, the running back from Texas. But man, again, it's not like you're asking them to go from Gus Malzahn to Tim Harris, and you don't have Mike Norvell also. Like if you had a defensive head coach, Mike Elko was the head coach, and you lost an offensive coordinator who'd been in the business for 30 years, been a head coach for 15 years. And then you're going to a position coach who's only kind of dabbled in play calling before with a defensive head coach. That's not the case here. I mean, I think Mike Norvell, these guys, I think can sell to these players that, yeah, man, he's called plays. He's had success. That's how he got the Florida State head coaching job. So from that standpoint, it's not a huge bait and switch to those players. I don't think they'll feel jilted, but from the standpoint of, you would definitely rather this happen now than in the middle of portal season.
I know what the rule is for the head coach. What is the rule about a transfer possibility when an OC rides?
I have not heard that there is.
I didn't think there was either, but I didn't know.
Yeah, so I don't think there is, and somebody can tell me if I missed something. The rules on all that stuff has changed by the minute over the last few years. So I hate to say I'm wrong, but I don't believe there is one for the coordinator.
I think we're going to wrap on that note, good sir. I apologize to everybody for the impromptu pullover, but we needed to get this video out, and I wanted to talk to Ira, and we needed to discuss the situation that sees Gus Malzahn retiring abruptly from Florida State. Coach Harris is now the OC. These are the certainties that we know. Everything else will be speculated. We've got a lot more coverage to come. It will not be on the JCS today.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say real quick is stay connected with warchant.com. Corey and I will have a lot more coverage. Matt will have a lot more coverage talking to recruits, talking to the players that we have access to this week. There's supposed to be interviews actually on Wednesday with several of the players. So we're going to get reaction from those guys as the week goes on as well. And we'll have plenty of coverage at warchant.com. I was hoping to hear you guys talk about the Lightning experience, because that, dude, when it was 5-1, I was feeling bad for you and Tom last night, sitting in 30-something degree temperatures and seeing your team lose.
I think the texts were coming in fast and furious along those lines. The sentiments were, oh my God, you guys went down there for that. But alas, the Bolts pull it out. But hey, listen, tomorrow I'll be back with you and Corey on Seminole Headlines. There'll be a JCS 1 hour bonus after that. So we're back in full swing. The timing of this could not have been worse. But hey, it happened. But you guys will hold it down, of course. And yeah, as for those wondering, I'll be back on tomorrow. But yeah, for now, it's Ira and Corey and Aslan and Matt and Mike. Everybody will have you covered.